Welcome back. We are back with another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show. My name is Cody. We're going to have a quick one tonight as there was a little bit of action for the Giants today. They added 3 players to the 40-man roster in order to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. We're going to discuss those players and why they were added. We're also going to talk about why a couple guys weren't added to the 40-man roster and protected. To start off, we'll go through the players that were added. The first guy is going to be Kai-Wei Teng. He's a 25-year-old. He was originally signed by the Minnesota Twins in 2017, traded to the Giants in 2019 in the Sam Dyson trade. Had a pretty solid year last year, started the season in Double-A, made 12 starts there, got the promotion over to Sacramento, made 17 starts in Sacramento, had a 4.22 ERA in the PCL, which is very good in the PCL, and had a 4.42 ERA across or over the whole season. Has some nice swing and miss to his game. He has 96 strikeouts last year in 79 innings in AAA. He did walk about a little over 5 batters per 9. That's kind of been what's held him back so far in his career. But with his experience at AAA, it made sense. He was definitely a player that there was going to be a lot of risk if they didn't protect him and add him to the 40-man. Seems like a guy that was very likely to get selected and good chance of him sticking with a team, especially if a team that's, lacking talent. They probably could have easily fit him in to the 40 or into their active roster throughout the season. He probably would have been a back end of the rotation piece or possibly a bulk guy, kind of like Jacob Junis was for the Giants this last year. He's a guy I could definitely see contributing to the Giants in 2024. I don't think he'll be on the opening day roster, but there's a good chance that he'll get the call at some point next season. He's going into his age 25 season, so he is still pretty young. And I think at the very least, he'll be a good bulk piece, like I said, kind of in the Jacob Junis role, maybe used similarly to how Tristan Beck was used this past season. So we'll see how he ends up performing this year. But I think that was the right call to add him. The next guy was Erik Miller. He was probably the most obvious choice. He has very good stuff. Has a mid to high 90s fastball, touches 99. His best pitch is probably his changeup, which kind of just falls off the plate in front of the hitters. And he has also kind of a sweeping slider. All 3 of these pitches are given 60 grades, which is very good. So you might look at a guy like him and see his numbers down in AAA and go, how is this guy still in AAA? I mean, he had a 2.77 ERA in the PCL last year in 62 innings, which is very good. But then you see that he walks almost 6.5 batters per 9, and that's the reason why he's still in AAA. But I think he's probably an obvious piece to make the opening day roster in the bullpen. I think he's going to end up taking Scott Alexander's spot as a lefty out of the pen. So we'll see how he does, but he struck out almost 13 batters per 9 last year, so had a ton of success. He was originally actually drafted out of Stanford by the Phillies in the 4th round, and I think it was 2019, and then they traded him to the Giants this last offseason for Junior Marte. He's going to be 26 this year, so a bit on the older side as far as prospects go, but still he's got a live arm, and I could see him if he gets the control a little bit improves his control a little bit. He very likely could be a back end of the bullpen guy, high leverage guy for sure. He was probably, like I said, the most obvious one. I think honestly, if they didn't protect him, I think there was about 100% chance of him getting drafted, and I would have been floored if he didn't stick with whatever team he ended up on. So I think that was an easy decision for the Giants. The last guy was actually probably the most surprising. It was Trevor McDonald. He's currently rated as their number 22 prospect. Doesn't have like overwhelmingly good stuff. He's a 4-pitch guy, fastball, changeup, slider, curveball. None of his pitches are like, exceedingly good. Throws low to mid 90s. They say he can touch 97, but he doesn't have a super live arm. But scouts seem to think he could still end up being a back end of the rotation guy, maybe a bolt guy in the pen. But a little bit surprising that they ended up signing, or they ended up protecting him. He hasn't pitched above high A. But that said, the Rule 5 draft, you're going to see a lot more pitchers go or get selected, because even if you're in high A, if you have really good stuff, more pitchers can make the jump from high A to quickly to the majors than any kind of position players can. It's easier to stash these guys, especially in a 13-person rotation or pitching staff that you're going to carry on the active roster. It's a lot easier to stash these guys, and a lot of them, a lot of the pitchers are the ones that could potentially make that jump quickly. I mean, you see college pitchers sometimes that get drafted and they make the majors like later that year. So, and this is a guy that truly dominated down in high A. I mean, he had a sub-1 ERA and a sub-1 WHIP. So, very good. He's performed very dominantly for the level he was at. So it's not outside the realm that he could have gotten taken. And had they not protected him, now would he have stuck the entire year? Probably not. There's a very good likelihood that he would have ended up getting sent back to the Giants if somebody didn't keep him on their active roster, because that's how it works with the Rule 5. If you take a guy and you don't keep them on your active roster the entire season, you have to offer them back to the team you selected from. That's part of why I think Blake Sabol ended up staying up on the big league club as long as he did last year, even when he had a lot of his struggles, and showed that he probably needed time in AAA to better develop as a catcher. Had the Giants sent him down, they would have had to offer him back to Pittsburgh, I believe. So that's, it's kind of the game you have to play when you take one of these Rule 5 guys. So I can kind of understand why they took it or why they added him, but on the other side, I think it might have been a bit of a stretch that he was really a risk to like actually A, get taken, and B, stay on that team for the entire season. So then we're going to move on to kind of the two guys that I think were most surprising, and a lot of people have been kind of questioning why they weren't added to the 40-man roster. And those are going to be Grant McCray and Aeverson Arteaga, who are two of the Giants' top prospects. McCray is currently rated number 7. I think Arteaga was number 11 yesterday when we went over our list. But either way, I think the easy answer on this one is they didn't add them for 2 reasons. Number one, they only have so many roster spots or 40-man spots. And, Farhan even touched on it today when he was talking to the media. And he brought up the fact that, it's hard to use a roster spot on a guy that you view is a year plus away from the majors. And these are both players that have not played above high A yet. And not only that, they're both players that they both have clear warts in their game right now. That's probably holding them back. So you have a guy like McCray, for instance, who's not played above high A, and he strikes out 30% of the time. That's a guy that if you try and make him make the jump up to the major leagues, the odds are like he's going to get eaten alive by major league pitching right now. He for sure needs more time down in the minors, especially in the upper minors. And he'll probably start the season in Double A. I think that both of them will, but and then Arteaga, he was a below. If you go off WRC plus, I think he had an 89 WRC plus, which means he was 11% worse than the average hitter at that level. Now he was young for high A, but his bat is definitely behind. So, well, behind for the level he's playing at, and especially in comparison to his glove, which is considered elite. Now, the flip side of this is, if a team, and we'll use like the Detroit Tigers, for example, who have Scott Harris as their GM. If a team like the Tigers decides, hey, we don't care about using a roster spot to get more talent in our system, I could see them taking a guy like Grant McCray and just stashing him as a fifth or sixth outfielder on the roster and using his speed and defense, which could, help them win games with that. But the problem is, are they going to, quote unquote, waste a roster spot in order to just stash a guy for a year that desperately, he needs the at-bats for his development, and you're stalling his development if you just bring him up to a major league team and sit him on a bench all season. So I don't see either of those guys really I don't think they were big risks to get drafted. And even if they do get drafted, the reality is if either guy gets drafted, there's a probably better than 90% chance that player is going to end up returned to the Giants at some point, whether it's whenever that team makes roster cuts in spring training, prior to opening day, or sometime during the season. Like, the odds of that player sticking with whatever team drafts them for the entire season is pretty slim. So I think that's why they didn't add those two, which makes sense. I kind of would have liked to see them add McCray just be sure, because for a team that is severely lacking in both center field defense and team speed, it's hard to put a guy that has 70 grade speed at risk. But I still don't think that he's going to end up taking on another team all season, and they'll end up losing him for good unless he just comes out and surprises people. So now, where does this leave the Giants? This is going to leave the Giants at they have 39 of their 40 roster spots currently filled. So that leaves them only one roster spot. Now, does that mean they're only going to sign one guy in free agency? No, that it doesn't really matter in that sense. They still have a ton of guys that are trade possibilities. You have guys like Joey Bart's taking up a spot. There's a chance he gets moved. You have the as we've touched on, the log jam in the outfield, where you have Haniger, Conforto, Yaz, and Slater. You have between J.D. Davis and Casey Schmidt, if they were to make a move for a guy like Matt Chapman, you could almost guarantee one of those guys gets moved. Or they might move like Wilmer Flores and kick J.D. Davis across the diamond. So they have a ton of options, and there's other guys that are in the minors, like Sean Jelly is taking up a roster spot, right? A 40-man roster spot. Yeah, there's a lot of options to maneuver if and when they make moves to create additional 40-man spots. But they just don't want to waste spots on guys that are, not going to be able to contribute more than likely in 2024. So, follow me on Twitter at Even Your Dynasty. Well, it's at EYD Show under Even Your Dynasty Show. I'll have the links down in the bio. Definitely like, subscribe, comment. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Send me any questions if you want anything that's addressed in future shows. Hopefully we'll get more news tomorrow, but otherwise we'll be posting again probably later this week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch y'all later. Peace.